Hello students, sorry I wasn't able to be with you this chapter. However, I'm going to go ahead and do a brief review of this chapter, some of the key components that are really important for the chapter and the homework assignments, and then I'll post a separate video where I explain the homework assignments. So in this video it's just going to be the key components of the chapter. In this chapter we're talking about intangibles, intangible assets. So let's go ahead and talk about that and what that means. So first of all, an intangible asset is an asset, meaning something that a resource that our business has, but it lacks physical substance, and it's not a financial instrument. So we're going to see some great examples of intangibles such as copyrights or a trademark. These are definitely resources, things of value to the business, but they're more of an idea. So typical examples that we see are patents. A patent's an idea that you have, like an invention. Copyrights, franchises or licensing, trademarks, and then something called goodwill. Don't worry about goodwill now, we'll get back to that in a few minutes. So generally speaking, how does an intangible work? Well, if we bought the intangible, meaning we bought the trademark, or we bought the copyright, or we bought the patent, so it's already been there, a company already has the patent, already has the trademark, etc. If we purchase it, then we record it on the books as an asset, just like we would record a truck or a piece of equipment. It's reported at the cost, and the cost means not just how much it cost us to buy it from the company, but the cost to get the intangible ready for its intended use. So that usually means that there was some kind of legal or liability associated with the patent or the other intangible that you needed to pay, then that would go in as part of the cost too. So typically these costs would include how much you paid for it, plus legal fees is one of the main ones. If the intangible is internally created, meaning that you did the research to come up with the invention, your business did the research to come up with the invention, and then you patented it, that's what we mean by internally created, or like the branding that your business maybe spends years developing, the copyright, the Nike swoosh, the Coca-Cola logo, the NFL franchise. When those are developed internally over years and years, then you expense that amount. So you've spent years developing the value of the trademark that you have through marketing, through branding, through all kinds of different methodologies, and you've built up that trademark. Then you're not going to put it on the books as an asset, you're going to expense those costs along the way. So for example, look at research and development. Research and development leads to an idea that often generates a patent that means future profitability. Well, that to me sounds like an asset, but the underlying controversy is that we don't know what that what the future patent's going to bring us, right? We know that it's a good idea, but we don't really know what the future, it's hard to put a value on it. So if we internally develop it, we're going to expense the costs, not capitalize them and put them on the books as an asset. If we were to buy the patent, then we put them on the books as an asset. But if we develop it internally, we expense it. So if you develop a patent internally, you're not going to see it as an asset. Instead you're going to see the expenses along the way that you paid your scientists or your inventors or your engineers, and the cost of the goods that the cost of the equipment and all the things that went into buying to creating the patent. You're going to see all that as an expense when it happened. So that's why there's a controversy there, because even though you spent time developing it for a future resource, it doesn't show up as an asset, and assets are future resources, because the reason is because it's too subjective. It's too hard to pinpoint the value. The only time that doesn't happen is if we go back, if we purchased it, because then we know the value. If we bought the patent from another company for $1 million, we know what the value is, $1 million. But if we developed it, we expensed it along the way. I know I spent a lot of time on these two slides, but that's really the underlying concept that you need to understand for intangibles. If an intangible has a limited life, for example, if you bought a patent and it's only expected to last for 10 years before it becomes useless, for whatever reason, then you would amortize it. Amortizing is like expensing. So amortizing is like depreciating. So you would depreciate it over its life, but we don't call it depreciation with intangibles. We call it amortization. So you would just expense it over the useful life that you think it's going to have. Now, if it's an indefinite life, meaning you don't see the value ever going away, it's going to be around forever, like land. Land has an indefinite life, so you don't depreciate land. Well, if you think that there's an indefinite life for the intangible, the same thing, you don't depreciate it. You don't amortize it. Now, I'll say one thing about that. You do have to test every once in a while to see if the value has decreased. So if you had a trademark but your branding has just fallen apart, then you would have to test for the loss of value, and then you would have to write it down. So here's just an overview. If an intangible has a limited life and you purchased it, you're going to capitalize it, right? And if it's got a limited life, you're going to amortize it over the useful life. If it has an indefinite life, you're going to, and you purchase it, you're going to capitalize it, but you're not going to amortize it. Now, if you acquired it by creating it from scratch, then you expense it at the time that you're, over the times that you spent money to develop that patent. The types of intangibles, there are 5 major types, and we're going to look at these. So we have the marketing, right? Trademarks, trade names, domain names. If it's got an indefinite life, then you do not amortize it. If you were to have purchased it. So if you have an intangible asset on your books, you would not amortize the trademarks or trade names because they're considered to have an indefinite life. Stuff like customer lists, though, if you had, let's say you bought a customer list for someone, now you have it as an asset. So that does have typically a limited life because customer lists, they go stale. So you would amortize it over how long you think that is. Copyrights, right? So copyrights typically have useful lives based on the legal life that they're given. So music, books, artwork, these things that have copyrights associated with them will have a legal useful life, and you amortize it over that. Franchises, other types of licensing agreements for TV broadcasting, that kind of thing, those all have limited lives, so you amortize those. And then technology such as patents, for example, would have limited lives too. Patents can't last forever, and so the patent is going to be amortized over that life. Now, if you think the technology is going to become obsolete before the patent's legal life, then you would use the amortization over the useful life. How long do you think that will last before it becomes obsolete? So stuff that's on the cutting edge may not be on the cutting edge for that long. So even though it might have a 10-year legal life, it's not going to be 10 years before it becomes obsolete, so you would use the shorter amount. So the last thing we're going to talk about is an intangible called goodwill. So first of all, goodwill has nothing to do with with something like charity or anything like that. It has to do when a business buys another business. So if the parent buys an entire other company, so a parent company buys a subsidiary, they don't buy part of it, they buy 100% of it, goodwill might occur. It might occur. So if you take, here's a company, Tractorling Company, and Tractorling, this is their balance sheet. It shows that their assets are worth $255,000, liabilities $55,000. So their company's on the books worth $200,000. However, the fair value, meaning how much the assets are worth on the market, is more. It's not $200,000. It's worth $350,000. However, the parent company bought Tractorling not for $350,000. They like the company and they believe in it. They believe that maybe the managers are very talented and the company's got some really good customer relationships. And so instead of paying what the company's assets are worth fair value, they pay $400,000. So they pay more than the fair value. So that's the goodwill. The goodwill is how much the parent company paid more than the fair value of the company. So that means that when we bought the company, we have to add all of their assets to us to write them all up. So the cash so all of their assets and liabilities goes on our books of the company we bought at the fair value, and we spent $400,000 to buy them. So we bought them for $400,000. When I say we, I mean the parent. Here's how much the cash is worth, the receivables, inventory, property, plant, equipment, patents. Here's the liabilities that they have, and the difference is the goodwill. That's how much more we spent in cash over the value of the resources. That's what goodwill is that extra something we paid more than the value of the assets because we really wanted the company. We felt like they had some intrinsic value that was more than the adding up all the assets. So that being said, that's just an overview of just the key most important elements. We'll do another short video going through the homework.